Hi guys, and welcome back to another video. So there's some pushback against digital ID. Sadly, not in Canada, but in the UK. But what I think is important here is that we need to take the UK model of resistance against digital ID and the imposition of digital ID and use it as a model that can eventually be deployed in Canada. But beyond that, I think what's really important is that what we're seeing happening there is gradually going to occur in Canada, especially given the two governments, Keir Starmer's Labour government and Mark Carney's Liberal government, almost mirror image. But I can get into more of that later on. But there's been significant pushback. In fact, there was an e-petition. Now in the UK, there's a mechanism where members of the public can petition the government to debate certain legislation or proposed legislation. And in this case, there was an e-petition arguing against the imposition of digital ID. And so far, it is one of the most signed petitions in the history of parliamentary e-petitions. And I think almost 4 million people have signed it thus far. So once it gets to that number, parliamentarians can then debate, which they did. They took this to a debate on, I believe it was on the 8th of December. I'll confirm that. And they basically, parliamentarians from different parties got together and they debated the imposition of digital ID, specifically bringing to Parliament the opposition of the MPs brought to Parliament the opposition of their constituents to this. Of course, what we saw during this debate was the defense of digital ID by members of the Labour government. And what they've done is basically they've taken this idea that everyone needs digital ID to control or to deal with the issue of illegal migrants working in the UK. So they're basically saying there's a crisis, this is the crisis, this is what we need to do it. If it wasn't the migrants, they would just repackage it under something else. They would create or invent another crisis and then say digital ID will protect us against this. Anyway, I'm going to post below the link to the Hansard transcript of the meeting, of the parliamentary committee meeting, and you can read it for yourself. There's a lot; it's fairly extensive, but I'll just go over some of the main highlights here. And again, what I think is really great about this is that one, we're seeing at the parliamentary level real opposition. You know, parliamentarians of all different parties stepping forward and saying, no, my constituents do not want this. This is not a good idea. This is not needed. And we're not buying into your argument that this form of control, an unfettered form of control, it will protect us against the issue you're saying it's designed to protect us against. Now, my own personal opinion, you want to deal with the illegal migrants, blockade the channel with the Royal Navy, send the dingers back to France. Too easy. But again, this is something that Starmer's refusing to do. Getting back to the digital ID, some really interesting points, some really great points raised by parliamentarians. So I'm just going to read some of the key highlights that parliamentarians of the parliamentarians' argument. So if the real target is people who are here illegally, why on earth do 67 million British citizens who already have national insurance numbers, passports, driving licenses, and birth certificates need to be dragged into a brand new compulsory database as well? What exactly is it about stopping the crisis of inflatable dinghies in the channel that requires your son, your daughter, your dad, or your 90-year-old grandma to hand over their data and facial geometry to the Home Office server? I like this one. Once the digital identities infrastructure is in place, it will become so much harder for a well-meaning minister to resist the idea that they can fix areas of public policy by tracking and controlling at an ever finer level how a population behaves. And a lot of people clearly are starting to see a correlation between digital ID and other forms of technological surveillance, bringing it all together and what the potential risk and ramification is. So another parliamentarian, just look at the social credit system in China. Facial recognition, which I discussed in AI facial recognition in my previous video, facial recognition linked to ID penalizes people. Blacklisted citizens cannot buy train or plane tickets, book hotels, or apply for certain jobs. This government have already indicated that migration work and renting will be tied to ID, but how long will it be before future governments push further and accessing state services is brought under control and monitoring of digital ID? Now, this has already happened. We've already seen the Liberal government's attempt during the COVID, during the pandemic, trying to tie access to public services to a vaccine ID. Now, this is just this is just repackaged. They've already done this. They've already shown a willingness to tie control to an ID, to a scannable ID, and then if we're not in compliance, we can be cut off, which they're doing in China, which Trudeau already did in Canada. So now, considering various of the pieces of legislation the Carney government is bringing in, and a few of them I'll be discussing in another video, this one is interesting. We are already seeing signs of such a framework in the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill, the Online Safety Act 2023, and the One Login System. Combined with a formal digital ID, those frameworks would create a world of control for Whitehall, the British government, and a soulless dystopia for the rest of us. Together, they replace the honesty and decency of human-to-human interaction with an opaque, mechanical, computer says no future. The scary truth is that control and ID cards hold an appeal for anyone who has access to power. It takes a conscious effort by every one of us to resist the temptation. Power does corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Now, I can't think of a more, a frequently used saying, axiom. I can't think of anything more appropriate when it comes to looking at the excesses in their various guises, the excesses of the Trudeau/Carney government. And I think summing it up, where I think a lot of the concern is and a lot of the worry, digital ID is an ever more intrusive evolution of traditional ID cards, one that promises to be more oppressive. Coupled with the powers of digital databases, increasing widespread facial recognition, digitalized public services, and the looming prospect of a central bank's digital currency, digital ID threatens to create an all-encompassing digital surveillance state that even George Orwell's 1984 could not predict. I mean, a few years ago, statements like that we might have thought as being exaggerations, that okay, you're reading into it too much, but not today. Not today. I think look at what's happening in the UK. I never thought we in the UK would see the abolition of the jury system, a government that can just cancel elections, robbing citizens of their right to choose their representatives. Starmer's done that. Starmer is cancelling elections because he knows he's losing. UK arresting people for hurty words on social media. More people are arrested for offensive social media posts in the UK than Russia, China, and North Korea. So the birthplace of democracy, I think the birthplace of free speech, is now arresting more people for hurty words on social media. So this is where the fear of the British public lies. that they have a government which is doing, unfortunately has a majority, is doing absolutely everything it wants to push forward its agendas, to push forward its agenda of net zero, to push forward its agenda of maintaining state power, of shutting down all types of dissent. And the imposition of a digital ID framed within an argument that is designed to protect us. Again, get worried when they say they're doing something to protect us or make our lives easier. This is why people are getting concerned, and this is why close to 4 million people have signed, I think it's 4 million people have signed this e-petition. And it seems that a growing number of parliamentarians are voicing their concerns, are saying, no, we do not want this. So it's happening. For the first time, I think that pushback is really happening. And why I think that we need to pay a lot more attention in Canada is because it's, things happen here without people knowing. I think for too long, we believed that the government or our government, the governments in Canada, had the interests of Canadians at heart. So we basically just, hands off, do what you got to do to help us build a great country. I think that lack of attention will ensure that, and I think it's only going to be the Liberals doing this, the Liberals push forward a digital ID. All of the parts are there, it's just going to be a question of connecting everything. And, a government that's willing to enact the War Measures Act, a government that's willing to arrest anybody or shut down bank accounts of people who go against what the government wants to do, goes against a government narrative. And putting it all together, with AI facial recognition technology in Edmonton. Getting back to the AI facial recognition technology, I mentioned in the video, I think it was yesterday, that the company Axon is the company behind these cameras, but they're not telling us who is actually building the back-end system to this. I've done some digging, and now there's no indication whether or not this definitely is the case, but they do a lot of work with a company called Tech5, a software company in Geneva, Switzerland, which is a pioneer in biometric and identity management technologies. Now, Axon has worked quite a lot with Tech5. But something else I found out too, which is why there needs to be complete open transparency on these systems being developed. Axon is an Arizona-based US company. Under US law, there is something called let me just find it, the US Cloud Act, Clarifying Lawful Overseas Use of Data Act of 2018. An act that allows US law enforcement to compel US-based tech companies to provide requested data, even if stored overseas. So under this act, theoretically, anything that Axon gathers, you might hear, some noise in the background. Anything that Axon gathers from the AI facial recognition cameras in Edmonton, even if they keep the servers in Canada, under the US Cloud Act, because Axon is a US company, law enforcement can be compelled to provide requested data. So technically, all of the facial captures, anything that they capture, and all of the data they gather on people they're looking at through these cameras can end up in the hands of US law enforcement. This is where control needs to be, or oversight is desperately needed. They're rolling out this project. I don't know if there's been any widespread discussion, if the Edmonton Police Ethics Committee or whatever they have has looked into this. this needs to be looked at. Again, getting back to who is on the back end, who is controlling our information, what are they going to do with it, and potentially what could happen to it. So there's a lot more to research and to look at here. In the meantime, pushback is happening. UK parliamentarians are definitely saying, no, this is not what my constituents want. We do not want a digital ID. I think this last one is good. The attitude of control strikes at the very heart of our political traditions. And I think you can extrapolate and say the same thing in Canada. We are a representative democracy, not a command and control state. A government exists by the will of the people, not the other way around. Put simply, we are not a papers, please society. Papieren bitte. We are not a papers, please society. So let's see what happens. Let's see. Now I think once it has been, they've had this debate, it then goes for further research and examination. But we'll see what comes out of this. But let's pay very close attention to all of these advances that are happening in Canada, in Quebec, Edmonton, and I'm sure there's going to be more that are going to be uncovered. Let's see what's happening. Let's question who's behind this, who's controlling the data, what happens to our personal data, and eventually, what can we do to say, you know what, we need to kind of like pause this, we need to have some discussion. Let's start using. I think the Hansard transcript will be great to forward to every MP in Canada. Conservatives are against digital ID, but the Liberals, any Liberal MP, I think should read this and say this is what people think. At the end of the day, whether you're in the UK or Canada, very similar, I think, traditional belief in what democracy is and what freedom is. And I think that what's happening in the UK now in terms of resistance, in terms of voicing dissent, I think can serve as a good model to eventually deploy in Canada. So I'm continuing to look into this. I'll keep you guys posted and what I come up with. Thank you for making it this far in the video. And again, for all of the new subscribers, I really appreciate you subscribing to the channel. If anybody hasn't already, I would really appreciate you subscribing to the channel to stay up to date on what I'm posting, and to hit the bell notification to see when I'm dropping a new video. Thank you to everybody that left comments recently. I'm still trying to get to all of them. I'm hoping over the next couple of days to do that. Quite a few have been left. In the meantime, anything else? Any comments you have? Any of your thoughts on digital ID, AI-based facial recognition? What are your concerns? Drop me a comment below. But thanks again, guys, and until the next video, take care of yourselves.